Okay, let's continue our second part of today's class. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So the character study is a part of biblical study or Bible study, and it's a kind of or part of literary study or study of literature. So you gotta know how to do a study of literature in general, whether it's the Bible or some other material. So that's basic understanding. And if you're at this level, the college level, you have at least 12 years of education, which basically trains you and equips you with the doing ability to do a literary study. And the narrative study, I mean, if you haven't done any academic study on the narrative, still with the 12 years of education that you may have, probably is enough to have basic knowledge and information regarding how to do a narrative study. Now it comes to the character study, which is a part of narrative study. Narrative study basically involves the study of character and study of episodes, or the plot. So you study the plot and character, and basically you do have some understanding on narrative, or you're ready to get into the message. So that's lesson 1, and let's go to lesson 2. Okay, here we go. So we'll go a little deeper into understanding biblical narrative. Now, begin by defining the narrative. I've done already some definition or explanation what the narratives are. What is a narrative? Here is a definition. The prominent communication tool. It is a tool to communicate among the human generation, among humans. Very ancient, and probably is the oldest way of communication. So whoever studies communication in the university and college, probably they do begin with understanding of narrative as well. So it's a prominent, primary, the basic, fundamental way of human communication. People from the beginning, they love to tell the story. They love to listen to the story. That's how it has been and how we are. Now, the people and time. Now, before I go on, there's some technical issues. That's why you are looking at the second part of the today's class. The first part, somehow the recording had some issues. The video, the phone didn't work, and we kind of lost most part of it. Just I'm sorry about that, and it's our technical mistake. Please understand. So, please focus on the second part. That's the narrative is a people and time. When you put people into the context of time and other people, then you have narrative, a story. So that's what the story is, what the narratives are. As a record of human existence. Okay, again, this is the key word that you're gonna hear over and over, time after time in my class. One of the key concepts in understanding my class. So existence is life, how you live. How you live. So that the narrative is a record of your mind or his or her or their existence. And people do have some interest in it. They want to listen to someone else's story, and they love to tell their own story, their existence. That's who we are, how we are built. And in doing so, usually we follow that structure 5W1H. That's it in English. So 5W, when, where, who, why, what. 5. That's basically 5 W's. Again, when, where, who, what, and why. And H is how. So these are the basic components, or the grid or screen or categories when you are trying to understand a narrative. So if you are a student of narrative and student of a character, you gotta know that 5W1H. Very basic and very key and important. What is a narrative? Basically, it's a storytelling and story listening. So storytelling, whether it's your personal story or whether it's someone else's story, whether it's a true story, or whether it's made up stories being told, thousands, no, millions and millions of stories being told in human existence. Some stories are important, some stories are not so important. Some stories are tragedy. Some stories are the story of success, and some stories are for happiness. Some stories are for sorrow. So there are many different kind of stories, and there are some stories that are short. There are some stories that are long. And when I grew up, I'm used to, or most of kids, who grew up in my age, they grew up listening to grandma's story or grandpa's story. These narratives, made up stories, sometimes real stories that are kind of re-edited. So storytelling narrative is a human nature. And all the stories that have so-called character. That's a people story. as even though some stories do have animals animated or made like a human character. Still, it's a story of character. And there's something called oral tradition. When we talk about Bible as a literature, and when we do the biblical studies, you're going to hear a lot of this so-called oral tradition. What it means is before people had written the letters to write their stories and their to record, they have to tell and memorize those stories, especially those important stories like a history, and important stories like a story of their ancestors. They wanted to remember it, make it record it, but they didn't have the letters, or they didn't have the video equipments at the time. So what they could do, and they had to do, is make it an oral tradition, meaning you are to memorize the story exactly as it was told. This has been the tradition in many other cultures, just even outside Israel and the Middle East. This tradition is all over the globe. So most cultures, whether it's in Latin America, the South America, Africa, in Asia, in Europe, regardless of their cultural backgrounds or cultural ethnic differences, there is something called oral tradition, which they focus and they are able to regurgitate and retell the story as exactly as it was told. There was a job or profession or vocation who are doing this for their living. So oral tradition has been kept, and especially when it comes to the religion, the things of faith and belief, oral tradition takes a very key or critical part in the old religion. So in the ancient religion, all the scriptures has been told by the priest, and one of the main job for a priest is to memorize and retell these stories regarding their religion. So that's what we call oral tradition. So the Bible was no exception. Most of the Old Testament, especially the first part of the stories that we read in the Bible, the Pentateuch, so first five books of the Bible, we also call the law. These are the law that has been memorized by people and was given to the next generation and the next generation and so on. And once they have the letters to write it down, then they put into their writings as soon as they had the letters. So before it was written on the skin of sheepskin or lambskin. They were in the head and the brain, the memory of the priest and the scribes, so-called the scribes. So they are the ones, the storytellers, or the priest their job was to keep that oral tradition as exactly as accurate as possible. Now, the story with the message. Most of the stories that I heard when I was little, as a kid, was for the entertainment. It was fun. But some of the stories by like Aesop of in Europe, or Andersen, the children's stories, they are not just for the fun, but they begin to have this lessons and a message in them. Even those stories that were told as a kind of entertainment for the children, they did serve educational purpose, which means it did have lessons in it. And the lesson is a kind of message, or lessons does include the message. So I could say most stories that are told, and the famous stories or known stories or retold stories, these does have messages or lessons in it. So it is hardly, unless you're just chatting about your personal life, in that case, you don't have the message. You do not intend to have a message in it. But the stories that we are going to study, or what we are studying, or stories in the Bible, 100%, absolutely, regardless of the genre or the style or the who we are studying, even the anti-God characters, for example, like a Pharaoh, or those Moab people in the story of Nehemiah. These characters, even the characters, do give us some lesson, and that they are included in the intention of God trying to give the message. So story is usually with the message. And as we define it, when we say narrative for in our class or in this class of doing the background study of Bible, narratives are the story with the message. Because all the Bible stories does have about biblical narratives does have a message. So when we say narrative, it means a story with message, a message, or messages. So one of the purpose of narrative, especially in the ancient days, is to preserve the culture, preserve the values, and to continue to deliver and transfer the worldview they have, and it does serve also educational purpose. They wanted their kids and children and children's children to learn from these stories. So preservation of who they are, their identity, their culture, their society, mainly depends on the stories that were told. That's how it worked in many, actually all the cultures before they have the means to write them down. Until then, these oral traditions and storytelling and narratives were the major tools. Even after they have the letters to write down, first thing they did is to record these oral traditions or the narratives into the writings and keep it in the form of record. So even in us in Asian cultures, the cultures in Far East, or even in Southeast Asia, they do have kept the same kind of the tradition or dynamics. So we have those ancient stories being told generation after generation until we had the means to write them down. Okay, needs for narratives. Here, we want to discuss why then people are so obsessed with the narratives. Because when I say narratives, you just think of the old storytelling, but that's not the case. Narratives are still dominant in current 21st century human existence. You go to movies and you pay certain amount of money to watch that movie. Why would you do that? Why would you watch dramas on your cell phone and on your TV? Why people buy the screens, paying $100,000 to watch these dramas? Storytelling, that's a narrative. Movies, dramas, K-dramas, all these things. People pay to watch or look and listen to the stories. Why would we do that? These are some of the primary or the higher cultural reasons. Number one, record and memory. People want to record about who they are, what they did, how they did it. And they want to themselves to remember it. They also want others to remember it. Excuse me, let me just check it here. Yeah, I'm just checking to see if it's recording. So people want to remember about himself or herself, and also to others to remember about them. That's a human nature, whether it's egoistic or whatever. So it is fact that they want to record who they are, what they did, how they did it, and want others to know about it. That's a human nature. Because of this human nature, that's built-in thing. Because of that, people want to have means, the ways to do it. And the narrative is, you don't need anything else but your mouth. And then you can tell the story. You are telling the story, and that becomes narrative. Also, people want to hear something that's new. Because when you hear the same thing over and over again, people don't want it. We are not kind of being that repetition or enjoys repetition. Once he repeats too many times you get bored, and sometimes you go crazy. So we don't like that. We always want something that's new, and new stories about people. It gives you some kind of feeling of satisfaction, or self-confirmation, meaning that you confirm that you are living because you hear these new things or new stories from other people and from other places. And later on I will continue on elaborate on this further, but that's one of the reasons. Then entertainment. People want to be entertained. People want to have fun. Human generation, us, we don't want to be bored. So we want something that is interesting, fun, and something to enjoy about. That's what makes a human a human. The entertainment is another reason for narrative. That's why we go pay $10, $12 to see a movie that's about an hour or at most 2 hours at the most. So you pay that much money to hear this narrative, watch narratives. And you spend 1-2 hours per day to watch a drama. That's who we are, for entertainment. Why the narratives? Need and desire to know. We want to know about the things. We want to have the knowledge. And the knowledge in the ancient times, even today, that is the same. The knowledge comes with or through or by the narrative. So it is natural for us to have that very, very intriguing desire to listen to narratives because we want to acquire the knowledge. You don't say to yourself, I need the knowledge. I want the knowledge. You don't do that, but behind us, this unconscious level, we do seek for and seek after this knowledge and things to know, something that's knowledge that is new. Then sense of belonging. This is another very important key element for human existence. Those who exist without a sense of belonging, they probably will die very soon or even kill himself or herself. Because they don't have that sense of belonging. Sense of belonging not only provides you with a sense of security, but it does identify who you are. So that's what the sense of belonging is. Unless you belong to some group or some family or some company or some group of friends, you cannot identify yourself. You lose your self-esteem, and you don't feel like it that you are existing. You know the story of Robinson Crusoe, and the story is that he was shipwrecked and then became by himself. There's a very similar story of movie in the modern context. Where the FedEx plane kind of crashes, and then there's only one survivor. What's his name? And then he finds a volleyball, and he makes that volleyball a friend. Where the Robinson Crusoe finds a guy, the native people, and calls him Friday. So these are the stories that show us that the sense of belonging is a very key and critical element to human existence. By listening to the narratives and hearing the narratives, it creates a sense of belonging, even though it's sometimes false, sometimes it's virtual, sometimes imaginatory. Still, you can survive even with a just imaginatory sense of belonging. And narratives, the movies and the dramas that you watch, and then the novel, the stories, written stories, novel. These are the things that creates you a very sense of belonging. Then, indirect experience. When you just watch like the fantasy, what's the name of this? When these stories that you read or watch on TV or movie screen, they give you the experience that you may never have as a real person. It gives you a different kind of existence. Sometimes it's exciting, sometimes it fulfills your wishes, and sometimes it provides you with a new perspective. And why do you think people pay to watch the movie Avada? The reason is it gives you a very extraordinary, indirect experience. It triggers your imagination. But as you watch those movies and stories, did you feel like that you are in there? You feel like that you are the main character. The reason that we feel the way we do is because it does give you that sense of very new self, another self, and through indirect experience. It's the same thing happens as you read the Bible stories. You read the story of Moses, story of Daniel, story of David, or story of Paul, or story of Peter. You may be able to identify yourself as one of the characters or characters there. And that gives a sense of that indirect experience. That you feel like that you are in the story and they're experiencing the same thing that these characters are experiencing. So that's why people listen to the narrative or tell the narrative. Here are some more of the reason for narrative. Education and teaching. So when you study a narrative, it gives you a lesson or lessons. People learn from these lessons, whether they like it or not, whether they intended it or not. When you listen to the story or stories, you certainly have some degree of happens in there. It's a very educational. Whether it's positive, negative, it depends on who you are. But still, the thing is, when you hear the story, and when you read the story or watch the story, these narratives give you the sense of maturity. You grow. You earn some knowledge, or you learn some virtues, and you get to know how other people think and how other people live, and how some people overcame their obstacles, and so on. These are the very key and important lessons. And this way of education has been with the human generation since the beginning of our existence. So not only this is a very old and ancient means of education, but it is the first and still the primary ways or means of us being educated. Then curiosity. Curiosity takes a very key part in the reason for us having to have narratives. People, human generation, we are built to have curiosity. We want to know. We cannot sustain of not knowing something that there is something. And if you don't know that there is something that doesn't matter, it doesn't occur you to have curiosity. But the thing is, you kind of know that there is something or something to know, and then you don't know, and it bothers you. Some people is very crazy about it, go crazy about it. So curiosity is one of the key things in human nature. So, if you have a question that if there is a God, what if there is God? That would be the question, and that's a kind of curiosity, or life curiosity, or critical question to ask. And what if there is something after death, after this life? What if? That raises an important curiosity issue. So people do have this, and we're curious to know about other people. I don't know why, but 99 out of 100 people, they want to know how other people live and how other people think, how other people go about. So that's a kind of curiosity that's built in us, and it does relate us to the narratives. Then, catalysis. The reason that we listen or watch or read the narrative is this, because we want to have that feeling of catalysis. Something that kind of like drinking a soda or the Sprite. It gives you that feeling of catalysis and physical way. But there's something called mental and spiritual catalysis, which is much deeper and much stronger than physical catalysis that you may have experienced. Once you have that mental and spiritual catalysis, and you will do whatever that is needed to get that. That's why some people go fanatic about this religious experiences, like a speaking in tongue. I mean, that's nothing, but somehow it gives you this spiritual catalysis when you speak in tongue. And because of that reason, people try to have that ability to speak in tongue. So, as a pastor, when someone is beginning to speak in tongue, I always try to identify the hidden motive. 9 out of 10, they do have this hidden motive. And speaking in tongue is a good thing biblically, but when you have the wrong motive, it can cause you big trouble. It's the same thing with all the things that we seek after. Some people have that catalysis by go shopping, and some people just wants to have that physical catalysis through the sexual experience, and some people go by drug, whether it's amphetamine or some other form of drugs. They pay money to have that catalytic experience through that, using that drug. And many people go drink alcohol, wine, to have that experience catalysis. So this is a human desire, built-in human nature, that you may want a catalysis. There's a positive and there's negative. And the narratives, whether it's positive or negative, it gives you that sense of catalysis as the story comes to an end. And then this. Maybe this is stronger than the sense of curiosity or catalysis, need for catalysis. People have interest in other people. Some seriously, some lightly, but it's fact that people are interested in other people. I don't know why, but somehow God created us to have that intention and desire to connect with other people. Because think of the world without nobody but yourself. Can you imagine that? Can you survive that? Yeah, from time to time, as you try to live this earthly life, you may feel like that you want to go away somewhere and be by yourself. But that's just for the short time. You cannot sustain not even a week without no one having around you. That's why even in jail cells, in the jails, people want to have other people in their room. Because isolation in jail cells, that's a punishment. Why do you think someone just making that person to be alone by himself or herself in a separate room with a person, because we have this very strong desire to relate to others. That's basically having to have interest in others. By reflecting or having that relationship with others, then you know who you are, and then you have the meaning of your existence. Because it gives you the meaning. If you lose the meaning in this life, then you have no reason to survive or sustain. So that's why family is important. That's why the friends are important. You do whatever possible to maintain your friendship with some of your best friends. See, these are all has to do with that interest in other people. And the narratives gives you that. Any kind of narrative, it's going to give you the sense or fulfill the need, your need to in other people. Whether it's a movie star, whether it's some unknown character. So it gives you that, fulfills that interest. Now, when you have a narrative, especially the written narrative, like that we are going to study in the Bible, and then the characters in it, there are several that hard components or hardwares that consist the narrative. So you have to have that understanding of these components to understand the biblical characters in the way we are trying to study. So let's look into these hard components. Plot. That's how you structure a story. Plot is a structure of a story. Usually we have something like the trigger or the beginning, and then development, and then climax, and the closure. Those are mainly the four basic the plots in a narrative. I mean, you learn this in your high school or junior high school. So the plot, but it can be much more complex than this four basic elements. So again, the plot is the structure of the story. And the Bible does the biblical narratives. Most of the narratives follow that basic story pattern. So of the plot. So there's how it begins, then it shows the story develops a little further, develop the character, and gives us some the background on the story and the place and so on. That's kind of development. Then it comes to the main story, the climax, where there's a conflict, and then the resolution to the conflict, which comes as a closure. So every narrative does have some element that is called a problem or issues, which is in the form of dilemma or paradox or conflict or confrontation. These are the things that usually elevates the story. And the plot is the way of structuring this story. Episode, like I defined this in several minutes ago. Episode is a unit of the narrative that has certain place, certain time, and certain character or characters around a given event or given issue. So that's an episode. So episode is the smallest unit of a story. So episode itself, it does establish a story. It can stand alone, but narratives usually have several different episodes connected one after another, following the time sequence or chronological order. That's how a narrative is structured usually. So probably 95% of the stories that we read just follows this time sequence from past to the present and present, sometimes to the future. So it kind of follows the minutes, hours, and the progression of the time is how the episode is arranged. So that is a usual plot. Then character, that's something that we are going to study. Person or the active being that appears in the story. Could it be sometimes an animal, sometimes in the anime stories, it could be the things like trees or rocks can be characterized. When they are characterized, then it becomes a character. Baby shark is a character. Mickey Mouse is a character. Even though it's an animal, it becomes a character. It's alive, it does speak, it does relate, it does anything that's that human does. It's animated and personalized, and then it becomes a character. Character can be he or she or whatever. We'll go into the character later on further. Plot. Let's go a little bit further into the plot. We have just a couple minutes. So I'll just introduce this and we'll just close the class today. Introduction. Basically, these are the steps. The beginning, the introduction, then development, and turn of event or climax, and then conclusion or closure. 한국말은 기승전결돼 있고, Chinese character, I don't know how you read that, but that doesn't make sense, right? Okay, so that's how usually the plot is. I already explained that. But the thing here, turn of event sometimes is also climax. The key event and the happening in the story. So usually that's the most important portion of a story, and that's where usually the message is included, or the lesson is included. Okay, so okay, thank you, and that will be the lesson for today, and I'll see you next week. And please don't forget to do the character study that you're given. It's gonna be, I haven't decided yet, but since we are not able to have the quiz, that template, the character study will count 4 points each. So 40 points the whole grade after all. So I'll just confirm that next week. Okay, thanks again.